Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started here in just a moment. All right, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our Healthy Futures webinar series. My name is Sarah Vivo. I am the director of the Indiana Cancer Consortium, a statewide network of organizations and individuals dedicated to decreasing the impact of cancer in Indiana. And today we're focusing on preventing cancer. There are many things that contribute to cancer risk, and some of those things, like age and your genetic makeup, they can't be controlled. But there are some things that you can do to decrease your chances of cancer diagnosis. So today we'll hear from some presenters who will cover some various topics about how you can prevent cancer in your everyday life. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Christy Waterman. She is a board-certified dermatology physician practicing at Booth Dermatology in Zionsville, Indiana. Thank you, Dr. Waterman.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to join you guys. I'll go ahead and share my presentation here. Good. How's that looking for you guys?
Looks great.
Awesome. So I will be speaking today about skin cancer, risks, prevention, and awareness. As Sarah said, I'm Christy Waterman. I'm a board-certified dermatology physician at Booth Dermatology, and I'm partnering this evening with Outrun the Sun. Of course, this is not medical advice that I'm giving, just information for you all this evening, and I don't have any disclosures to share. I would like to extend a very warm thank you to Outrun the Sun, specifically Anita Day, for introducing me to Sarah and the Indiana Cancer Consortium. I have the pleasure of serving as secretary on the board of OTS, and it is an honor and a privilege to surround myself with the best of the best in Indiana. We've got a fabulous group at Outrun the Sun. So, what is Outrun the Sun? So, OTS is Indiana's only nonprofit organization that's dedicated solely to skin cancer education and melanoma research. They have supported 34 melanoma research scientists actually across the United States in an effort to find treatments and a cure for melanoma. There's also a comprehensive skin cancer curriculum that Outrun the Sun has created for medical schools that's been shared with more than 100 schools of medicine in the United States and in 7 additional countries across the globe. Outrun the Sun also delivers sun safety education to youth through the creation of a sun safety patch program that's used by Girl Scouts councils. We partner with Music for All, formerly Bands of America. We also partner with the National FFA to engage students preparing for ag-related careers. So there's a very wide scope that OTS reaches. And so I just wanted to give them a shout out for connecting me with the ICC this evening. So let's get started. So today's agenda, we'll discuss what is skin cancer, what are some risks of developing skin cancer, how can skin cancer be prevented, and how can we increase skin cancer awareness in your own lives as individuals and as a community and in the state, really. So what is skin cancer? Here's just some fast facts for you. So each of you can read these on your own, but I'll go through them. So skin cancer is actually the #1 malignancy. It outranks every other type of cancer in the world. So throughout the entire globe, skin cancer is the #1 malignancy. Over 5 million cases are diagnosed in the US each year alone. 9,500 Americans are diagnosed with skin cancer on a daily basis. Specifically dealing with melanoma, 100,000 new cases are diagnosed in the US each year. That's the most dangerous type of skin cancer is melanoma. So that's a very concerning figure. Precancerous lesions called actinic keratoses actually affect more than 58 million Americans. So there's a precancer form, not full-blown skin cancer, but some of them do turn into skin cancer. So at least 1 in 5. Some of the more recent data actually says 1 in 3 Americans may develop skin cancer by age 70. Thankfully, even though it is the most common malignancy, it's also the most curable. It's highly curable when caught, diagnosed, and treated early. And it's also highly preventable in the majority of cases, which is very reassuring. So, here's some examples of the most common skin cancers. Many of your own friends and family members, maybe yourself, have been diagnosed with these more common skin cancers. So, number one, basal cell skin cancer. 80% of skin cancers that are diagnosed are these basal cell skin cancers. Now, thankfully, they almost never spread or metastasize separate from where they're growing. However, we do need to treat these because if left alone, which some people choose to not treat them, they do grow and they can become locally destructive over time. So we certainly don't want to leave a skin cancer here, like on this gentleman's cheek. You can imagine this may be only a few months old. If he leaves this, it will become larger and larger, and we'll be talking about a much more invasive surgery to remove that skin cancer if he doesn't get it treated early. The second most common type of skin cancer is called squamous cell carcinoma or squamous cell skin cancer. That represents about 18% of skin cancers. And these do metastasize in about 5% of cases. Now, when you hear squamous cell, I'm specifically talking about cutaneous squamous cell skin cancer. So there are other types of squamous cells inside the colon and inside other organs. So this is specifically skin squamous cell. So I'll just clarify that. But the hard part is we never know with certainty which squamous cell skin cancer will metastasize. Ones that are larger or on the face or certain other areas of the body have higher risk features. But even a small squamous cell skin cancer, on your back or on your arm, technically can metastasize, and that can lead to a lot of issues. The third type of skin cancer, and the most dangerous one, is melanoma, which represents 1 to 2% of skin cancers. And this, unfortunately, does cause the majority of skin cancer deaths. Thankfully, when it's diagnosed early, before it has a chance to spread or metastasize, it can be highly curable. And then I threw in some data on those precancers, those actinic keratoses. And again, that's important if we remember just the slide before, 58 million Americans are living with actinic keratoses. And it often, patients have no idea that they have precancer. Every day in my office, I see patients who think they just have some dry skin. That's how it's always described. Dry, flaky, scaly skin, when actually these represent precancerous lesions. And if we leave them alone, somewhere between 0.1 to 1% of these lesions may turn into squamous cell skin cancer. And a lot of my patients have 30, 40, 50 precancers. So, even though there's a maybe 1% chance or less than 1%, if you've got 50, the odds are, not necessarily in your favor. So it's important to recognize that what doesn't always look like skin cancer can be precancer or skin cancer. So what are some of our risks for developing skin cancer? So a history of blistering sunburns, especially in childhood, actually increases our risk of all types of skin cancer, basal, squamous, and melanoma. So not just melanoma here. Having light-colored skin that burns, having blonde or red hair, light eyes, light hair makes you more sensitive to the sun. Of course, a personal history of having skin cancer. Once you've had one, you're at a higher risk for a secondary skin cancer. Or if you have first degree relatives, so parents or siblings who have had skin cancer, then you are at a higher risk yourself. If you've got more than 50 moles or a history of atypical moles, also called dysplastic moles, then that does increase your risk for specifically melanoma. If you've got current tanning bed use or a prior history of tanning bed use, that increases your risk for all types of skin cancer, most concerning melanoma. And then repeated unprotected sun exposure. This is really the biggest risk factor for developing skin cancer. Sun exposure is cumulative. So from the day that we're born, we are exposed to the UV radiation in sun. And every time we are outside, whether we're getting a tan, whether we're just outside for 5 minutes, whether we're on a drive in a car and accumulating sun exposure on the window side, we are accumulating that ultraviolet radiation damage from the sun. And repeated exposure to this UV radiation is really what drives the majority of skin cancers. And then some special cases being an organ transplant recipient or being on immunosuppression, so being on chronic prednisone. Some of those transplant rejection medicines make you at higher risk to develop skin cancer because your immune system is not as strong or not as active as it normally would be in surveilling for skin cancer and repairing some of that UV radiation damage. Likewise, having chronic inflammation from wounds or from burn injuries does directly increase your risk for skin cancer in the area of that wound or injury. So those are some skin cancer risk factors. So what can we do to prevent skin cancer? Well, luckily, we have a lot of tools at our disposal. I think many people think, oh, sunscreen, that is my number one go-to. And while sunscreen is certainly one tool in our toolbox, if you take away one thing from my presentation this evening, I want you to grasp and understand that actually there's lots of tools in our toolbox. And if I were to choose one, I would choose sun protective clothing. So UPF clothing that has sunscreen really woven into it. A lot of clothing has SPF 50 or SPF 75 woven right into it. So very easy to incorporate that into our day-to-day activities. It's so easy to just slip on a sun shirt. They make them very fashionable these days. I've included a graphic here of some adult clothing, some childhood clothing that's really attractive and fun for the whole family. And not just when we're at the beach. It's not just swimwear. It's not just fishing shirts from Cabela's. They make these sorts of products very attractive. They've got athleisure wear, sport performance wear for when you're outside playing golf and tennis. They've got dinner wear, beach wear, all sorts of attractive options for you. So I really stress sun protective clothing, and that includes a wide brimmed hat as well. Wide brim would really be 3 inches, 3-inch brim all the way around your head. I think we get a false sense of protection when we're talking about hats. The majority of people rely on baseball hats, and that's simply not enough. I see so many patients who have this sharp cutoff of sun damage, and they're full of skin cancers all here on their cheeks, on their ears, on their neck, because they're chronic baseball hat wearers, and that really only protects really the forehead and maybe a little bit of the top of our face. So a wide brimmed hat and sun protective clothing. And the reason I like that is because most people do not apply sunscreen appropriately. Most studies show that people apply sunscreen only a quarter of the appropriate amount. So you might think you're getting SPF 40, and really you're probably only getting SPF 10. Most people also don't reapply enough. We'll get into that in the next slide, so I'll save a little bit there. So in addition to sun protective clothing and sunscreen, we can also seek shade. That's really one easy way to decrease our sun exposure using umbrellas, tents, shade structures at the beach. Now remember that the sun is still reflecting off sand, off of water, so we can't only rely on those things, but it's certainly additive. The more protection we're utilizing, the better our protection will be. And then, of course, avoiding tanning and tanning beds. There's really no such thing as a safe base tan or really a safe tan at all. If you're getting tan in any capacity, that means that your body is experiencing DNA damage from those UV rays. and it's causing cumulative damage. I included this interesting twin study here. So the story is that twin A here on the left was a lifetime sunscreen user. She used her sunscreen on a daily basis, year round. And her twin, unfortunately, decided not to take advantage of those sun protective measures. And you can see how we've got a lot of brown spots, not necessarily only skin cancer, but also skin aging. So more wrinkles that we have here. The brown spots certainly contribute to, or, signs of aging. And really just a difference there. So these ladies are actually the same age. They're twins. And you can see the undesirable effects that long-term sun exposure has. And lastly, from a prevention standpoint, skin cancer screenings. Please visit a board-certified dermatology physician for a full skin exam if you have those risk factors, which honestly, the majority of us do. A lot of us are reformed tanning bed users, myself included. So I've got those risk factors. I certainly need to be getting my yearly skin exams along with childhood sunburns. Again, most of us grew up at a time where sunscreen wasn't widely available or certainly wasn't popular. Usually baby oil and iodine is the story that I hear time and time again in practice in everyday life. So from a prevention standpoint, I'd like to bust a couple myths. This does kind of play off what we've already discussed. So UPF clothing is much more effective than sunscreen in the majority of cases. So again, most people are not using sunscreen thick enough or applying it in an even enough layer. And we have to remember that you have to reapply sunscreen every 60 to 90 minutes. That's way more often than what most people are reapplying. Most of my patients maybe put sunscreen on at like 8 or 9 a.m. and that's their only application. So I think it really gives us a false sense of security if we're not using it properly. Sunscreen expires. You've got to check the date. If we aren't, if we're using expired sunscreen, we're very likely not getting the protection that we need. And again, false sense of security doesn't do us any favors. So the American Academy of Dermatology recommends a broad spectrum sunscreen. That way we're covering for UVA and UVB radiation, which are both parts of the sun spectrum, and an SPF of 30 or above. Did you know that spray sunscreens must be rubbed in? Most people who choose spray sunscreens do so because they don't like the way it feels. They don't like having to touch it and, come into contact with it with their hands. But you read the instructions on those spray sunscreens. If you are not rubbing them in, then it is unlikely that you are getting that even full coating of protection that is really required. So again, false sense of security. Every day I'm asked, I will put sunscreen on if I go to the beach, but do I really have to put it on otherwise? Yes, 80% of the sun's UV rays actually penetrate through the clouds. So I don't care if it's a cloudy day, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's winter time. We really need to be thinking of sun protection year round. A white cotton t-shirt, that's what I used to put on when I was at the beach. I used to just put on a white cotton t-shirt and go in the water. That only has an SPF of 5. So again, false sense of security if we're relying on that as one of our sun protective measures. It's not enough. Skin damage from sun exposure is cumulative, like we mentioned, from the day we're born, all that sun exposure we get continues to build. So much of this damage occurs before the age of 20. It's so important that we're protecting our children. Even if we weren't protected as children, we can certainly do better for the next generation. And remember that the UV rays are reflecting. I have lots of patients who get sunburn in the winter. They go on a ski trip and they didn't think of the sun protection because it's winter time and it's cold outside. And there's a lot of rays bouncing off the snow, bouncing off sand, water. So remember those other protective measures too. Skin cancer awareness. I think some of these pictures are a little eye-opening for people. So we know that early detection allows for earlier treatment with skin cancer. And this picture directly below here, this is a field of precancers. So every one of these pink scaly lesions is actually a precancer. And you can see how they become quite large and rather confluent. They're kind of running into each other. It's hard to know where one precancer ends and the next begins. And even from a physician standpoint, sometimes precancer is on its way into that, full-blown skin cancer spectrum, and it can be hard to tell the difference. So when someone comes in, I mean, this gentleman right here, I could probably count 20 precancers. It's hard to treat these. We have good treatments in office, but it requires some time and some effort. So I would certainly encourage your friends and family to come in early because early detection allows for earlier treatment. For this gentleman, we would be able to help him with in-office and at-home treatments, hopefully before any one of these progresses to a squamous cell skin cancer. So early detection is key. Also, just be aware of spots that do not heal as expected. Oftentimes, the story is I have a pimple and I've had it for 3 or 4 months and it just hasn't gone away and it's just bleeding and not healing. 9 out of 10 times, that's actually a skin cancer, especially in people with those risk factors. So, if you've got a spot or a sore that's not healing in a couple weeks, it's really important to get that seen by a board certified dermatologist and get that evaluated early. Ask your dermatologist about any spots that are growing or changing or symptomatic. It's really helpful if you can say, hey, this spot has been there for a few months and I've noticed it's growing or it's bleeding or it's changing. That really helps us nail down the diagnosis fast. And then also from a melanoma's perspective, being aware of the ugly duckling sign. So a lot of people have lots of moles and they say, how do I know? These all kind of look like brown spots. How do I know? We call it the ugly duckling sign when there's one mole that just looks different than all the rest. It doesn't have a twin. It doesn't have another mole that looks matchy matchy. It's standing out amongst the rest as sort of an outlier or that ugly duckling, and that could be concerning. Also, the ABCDEs, we'll go over that in the next slide of melanoma. So that can be a helpful screening tool to decide, is this lesion concerning or not? And I'll just explain these photos here. This is a squamous cell skin cancer, so very well may have started out as a precancer in its early form, and then it has simply progressed. And so you can see how this is a cosmetically sensitive area on the face. We have surgical and non-surgical options to treat these, but this is a pretty sizable skin cancer. It would have been awesome if this person had the opportunity to come in maybe when it was a little bit smaller instead of being so large. Same thing here. This is a classic basal cell skin cancer. So very common on the tip of the nose. Baseball hat probably isn't protected in this area of the face. So lots of sun exposure that we're getting on that nose. And then here's an example of a melanoma. So let's go over those ABCDEs. This is specifically for melanoma, which we remind you is the deadliest form of skin cancer, but treatable when caught early. So if you notice any of these features in a lesion on your skin, please come get checked out, whether it's asymmetrical, whether it's got an irregular border, different colors. 2 to 3 colors is certainly concerning in one lesion. If the diameter is bigger than the pencil eraser, 6 millimeters, or really the easiest thing to say, change. If it's changing, come see me, come see a board certified dermatology physician. We would love to evaluate your spot and take great care of you. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. I hope that has been helpful and raised some awareness of your risks and some prevention factors and what you can do for skin cancer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waterman. And yeah, big shout out for Outrun the Sun. And just as a reminder, May is Skin Cancer Awareness Month. And we have Don't Friday, which is the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. So lots of reasons as we head into the warmer weather to be thinking about that sun safety. So thank you so much. Um, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sally Petty. Sally, you can share your slides if you'd like, but I did want to mention we do have a Q&A available at the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. And at the end, we'll have all three of our presenters that will be able to field questions to. So we definitely want this to be interactive and an opportunity for you to ask all the questions that you might have. So please feel free to enter any questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Sally Petty. Sally, thank you so much for being here. She is the Regional Program Director at the Indiana Department of Health's Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Division. And she's going to be talking to us about the very important and very real subject of youth vaping. So thank you so much, Sally, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Does everything look good on the slides?
Everything looks great.
Perfect, thank you. So yes, I am a regional program director with the Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Division at the Indiana Department of Health, and I have been working in tobacco prevention and substance use prevention since 2008. At the Department of Health, this is our mission and vision. I'm going to kind of skim these so we can get to the meat of what I want to talk about today. And our aim at the Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Division is in Indiana where all are free from tobacco addiction and exposure to commercial tobacco products. So I'm going to start by just setting the stage a little bit about how many people are using e-cigarettes. So I've got a few data slides, but I'll talk through them and kind of give you the main idea. So this data that you see on this slide comes from our youth tobacco survey from 2024. And in that year, we found that about 1 in 20 Indiana high school students reported currently using any tobacco product. That's e-cigarettes, cigarettes, any type of tobacco product. And about 1 in 30 middle school students reported currently using any tobacco product. In Indiana, the most commonly used products were e-cigarettes, followed by cigars, and that includes the cigarillos and little cigars, and then followed by cigarettes. And smaller proportions of students report current use of other products such as smokeless and nicotine pouches like Zens, but we are seeing some, we're kind of watching a little bit on the nicotine pouches because we're concerned those are ticking up a little bit. So in 2024, we did see a decrease in e-cigarette use among high school students, which was statistically significant, which was exciting news. But we also saw a slight increase in e-cigarette use among middle school students. Then when looking at students who have ever tried tobacco, we saw that the most common product that they tried first was an e-cigarette. About 66% of youth tried e-cigarettes first. Continuing to look at e-cigarette use behaviors, we saw that in 2024, nearly 22% or 1 in 5 middle school students and nearly 46% or 1 in 2 high school students reported having used their products on at least 20 of the past 30 days, which we would consider frequent use, and that indicates addiction to nicotine, which is very concerning. We also asked youth on the Youth Tobacco Survey specifically about advertising for e-cigarettes and where they're seeing ads and marketing. We saw similar trends for e-cigarette ads that we do for other types of tobacco ads. About 5 in 10 youth reported seeing e-cigarette ads in retailers, including convenience stores and gas stations. Over 2 in 10 middle school youth and 3 in 10 high school youth reported seeing ads on the internet. Print ads in magazines and newspapers continue to be less common, with about 1 in 10 youth seeing e-cigarette ads in print. And lastly, over 1 in 10 middle school youth and 2 in 10 high school youth reported seeing actors using e-cigarettes in movies and TV shows. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about that retail marketing. It's happening at the point of sale. So what is point of sale tobacco marketing? Essentially, it's marketing tobacco products where people buy where they buy products such as tobacco. It's convenience stores, gas stations, grocery stores, pharmacies, other types of stores. Point of sale marketing includes things like price promotions or discounts on tobacco products. It can also include in-store tobacco product displays, product placement, and retail advertising. It's also important to keep in mind that this type of marketing is not random. Retailers often have contracts with tobacco companies that specify where tobacco products have to be placed. It specifies the height of the products in the ads. It specifies what proportion of the display needs to be dedicated to which products. It's a very intentional form of marketing, and tobacco companies know it works, so they spend most of their marketing budget here. And that's why it's concerning that we're seeing, youth noting this is one of their number one place that they're being exposed to tobacco advertising. So I'm going to shift to talk a little bit more about what e-cigarettes or vapes are and how they impact health. So vapes come in many shapes and sizes, and you see some illustrations on the slide here. Some are designed to look like everyday objects like USBs, inhalers, highlighters, and more. Some might have a tank system that's refillable. Some might be rechargeable for long-term use, and some might be considered disposable for short-term use. Vapes contain batteries and e-liquid, which is also known as juice or e-juice or vape juice, and they include other parts, and it just kind of depends on the devices to the different types of parts and components to the device. The e-liquid itself contains the nicotine, as well as flavorings, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and other ingredients. How vapes work is that e-liquid heats up and it creates an aerosol that the user inhales. It's a common misperception that e-cigarettes have a vapor, but it's not a vapor like a water cloud. It's an aerosol, more like kind of like a hairspray type of formulation with the droplets. And when a person exhales that aerosol, it could look like a thick cloud, or it might be hard to see, and sometimes it can be hidden. We really still have a lot to learn about the short and the long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes, and they've really been on the market a very short time, less than 20 years. But we do know some things. We know that nicotine exposure and addiction is harmful for youth, and most vapes contain nicotine, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. We know that vaping can be harmful to the lungs and other organs because of the toxins and the carcinogens in the aerosol, which I'll talk about a little bit more. We know that teens who vape may experience coughing, wheezing, nausea, vomiting, headaches, and dizziness. And we've also had reports of youth having seizures, lung collapse, some other very concerning symptoms. Vapes can also cause environmental harm because of the leakage of e-liquids, and many have lithium batteries, which could be explosive. So here's where we're going to kind of look at that amount of nicotine in the e-cigarette. This image comes from Stanford's Tobacco Prevention Toolkit, and it illustrates the high levels of nicotine in some common forms of e-cigarettes. And I want to add to this too, the type of nicotine in e-cigarettes and many modern tobacco products is different from the nicotine in traditional combustible cigarettes. It's been chemically reformulated to make it go down easier and smoother. And that allows the person to ingest a considerably more nicotine than they could through traditional means. So we know, as I mentioned, nicotine is a highly addictive drug that can harm young brains. And young people are at the most risk for nicotine addiction because their brains are still developing until they're 25 years old. So it's very easy for them to get hooked. In fact, the younger people are when they start using tobacco, the more likely they are to become addicted. And once addicted, a person will keep using harmful tobacco products, even if they want to quit. And nicotine addiction primes the brain for addiction to other substances as well. Many popular brands of vapes contain very high nicotine levels. And as I mentioned, that new formulation of the nicotine itself makes it easier to consume those high levels of nicotine. It's the same addictive chemical that we found in other tobacco products. And teens who vape, they end up addicted to nicotine faster than those who smoke cigarettes. This is because vapes expose users to those very high levels of nicotine and more frequently. You're being able to take a puff every couple of seconds rather than smoking a cigarette, and then waiting a little bit and then taking another. So it really maintains that very high level of nicotine intake. The e-cigarettes also come in flavors that appeal to youth. Appealing flavors might cause teens to vape longer and more often, putting them at risk for more nicotine addiction. We also know that nicotine use by pregnant women is toxic to fetuses, and it can impair fetal brain and lung development. And because those e-cigarette solutions can have such high concentrations of nicotine, that creates the risk of nicotine overdose or nicotine poisoning. So that e-juice that fills the e-cigarette cartridge, it usually contains nicotine, which can be extracted from tobacco or synthetically manufactured. The juice often also contains propylene glycol, flavorings, and other chemicals. Studies have found that even e-cigarettes claiming to be nicotine-free do contain trace amounts of nicotine. Additionally, when that e-liquid heats up and it becomes the aerosol, more toxic chemicals are formed. So as I mentioned, the device itself, as well as the components of the juice, can vary. So e-cigarettes, the aerosol tends to have a varying composition. But we do know that the chemicals listed on the screen have all been found in e-cigarette aerosol. So first of all, nicotine. Also propylene glycol. That's a common additive in food, and it's also used to make things like antifreeze and paint solvent and artificial smoke in the fog machines. We do know that the aerosol contains carcinogens, which cause cancer, such as acetaldehyde and formaldehyde, and acrolein, which is a herbicide primarily used to kill weeds. And we know that chemical can cause irreversible lung damage. The aerosol also contains diacetyl, which is a flavoring chemical linked to the lung disease known as popcorn lung. Diethylene glycol is a toxic chemical used in antifreeze. It's also linked to lung disease. We know that the aerosol contains heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead. And a lot of times this is leaching out of the components of the device itself as it heats the liquid. The aerosol often contains cadmium, which is a toxic metal found in traditional cigarettes that causes breathing problems and disease. Benzene, which is a volatile organic compound found in car exhaust, and ultrafine particles that can be inhaled very deeply into the lungs. And I also want to note those flavoring chemicals, we mentioned the thousands of flavors that e-cigarettes come in. The chemicals used to create those flavors, a lot of them have been deemed as safe to eat and go through your digestive system, but not to heat and inhale. And those flavoring chemicals, the chemical composition changes when you heat it and create an aerosol. So that is also another safety concern. And as I mentioned with popcorn lung, we know some flavoring chemicals cause lung disease, but there's other flavoring chemicals that we don't know what the effect is when you inhale them. I also wanted to mention the connection between vaping and mental health. While it's well known that nicotine harms developing brains, including by making young people more susceptible to addiction, lesser known are the worrying connections between nicotine and mental health. Research shows that several connections between mental health and nicotine, as you see on the slide. Current e-cigarette users have double the odds of having a diagnosis of depression compared to those who have never vaped. Researchers believe that the trace metals in that vape liquid might play a role. Vaping can also worsen the symptoms of depression, and nicotine use is significantly associated with higher levels of ADHD symptoms. We know that young people vape nicotine-containing e-cigarettes because they're trying to cope. In our youth tobacco survey, we found that the #1 reason why youth were using e-cigarettes was because they felt anxious, stressed, or depressed. And a common misperception that nicotine relieves stress, anxiety, and depression, it's actually rooted in the cycle of nicotine withdrawal. The symptoms of nicotine withdrawal are irritability, anxiety, and depression that kind of mimic mental health conditions. So when someone is addicted to nicotine and they're experiencing symptoms of nicotine withdrawal, and then they consume more nicotine, that relieves those withdrawal symptoms. So it's critical to recognize that the cycle there of nicotine withdrawal and subsequent nicotine use and then alleviation of those symptoms in that addiction cycle. I think these points are really important to know and understand as nicotine is being positioned in some circles as a kind of some wellness circles. So we do really need to be thinking about it, talking about the role that nicotine plays. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what can we do about this? What are we doing about it? This slide shows our three-pronged approach that we are doing at the Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Division. We are using prevention intervention programs, as well as public education, mass media campaigns, and cessation services. These three prongs align with the tobacco control best practices through the CDC. Underneath all of these prongs are examples of some of the resources that we promote within each of the three categories. And you can see these resources and actually access some of the curriculum materials for free at the website listed at the bottom of the slide. So this graphic is the big picture. It shows an example of what a comprehensive approach looks like. And this is like all of these components are needed working together to be effective. And this type of an approach is what has caused our youth vaping rates to drop so dramatically in the last couple of years. So more specifically, for the public, for parents, for teachers, for anyone with youth in your life, here are some cessation resources that we recommend. The first is Quit Now Indiana's youth program. This is for youth ages 13 to 17. This program is run through an online dashboard. It has a 6-step program that takes about 6 to 8 weeks to complete, and it offers a certificate of completion. So youth can sign up through the texting number you can see on the screen, and you can also order free promotional materials using that QR code. The second program we recommend is the Live Vape Free program. This is for youth and young adults ages 13 to 26, and it's a texting-based program. It also offers a certificate of completion. There's a link on the screen, livevapefree.com, where youth can sign up. And then the QR code will take you to where you can order some free promotional materials. Live Vape Free also offers an adult advocate program. So if you're an adult who has a youth in your life that you want to talk about vapes and quitting vaping, there's a free course and a free conversation guide that you can get through livevapefree.com. You can also connect with your local tobacco control coalition. So on this map, you see all of the counties in Indiana where we have a local tobacco prevention coalition hard at work addressing vaping in their schools and in their communities. They are working on 100% tobacco-free school policies, including e-cigarettes. They're working on incorporating tobacco prevention, intervention, cessation programs, alternatives to suspension, all these types of things in the school setting. They support that Indiana Youth Tobacco Survey, where we get a lot of the data that I shared with you today. So you can join a coalition, get involved, and be a tobacco-free champion. This dashboard is where you can find and connect with your local tobacco coalition coordinator. So you see the link to the dashboard at the bottom of the screen. If you click the drop-down box where the red arrow is pointing, then you can select your county, and then you'll be able to see all the data that's local to your community, as well as the name and the contact information for your local coalition coordinator. So I encourage you to get connected, get involved, and take advantage of all these great free resources. So here's my contact information, and I will turn it back over to Sarah.
Thank you so much. So much information and learning so much about how vaping is affecting all of us, but especially our youth. So thank you for your work and for sharing with us today. I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Dodd go ahead and pull up his slides. And then in the meantime, just a reminder that we do have the Q&A open. So go ahead and put your questions in there and we will get them addressed at the end. Now I'm going to introduce Dr. Gentry Dodd. Dr. Dodd, are you with us?
I am, yes.
There he is.
Hey,
Dr. Dodd is a physical medicine and rehabilitation and lifestyle medicine physician, and also the Senior Director of Employee Health Services at Eli Lilly. So thank you so much for being here.
yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Let me
Are
get
you
my
going to
slide.
share your slides?
I am, yeah.
Perfect.
Um, just get them pulling. I gotta admit, I'm a Teams guy, so um, this may be a new endeavor for me.
Perfect. I think if you just put it in slideshow, we'll be good. There you go.
So, I'm going to be talking about breast cancer and the role nutrition plays in 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 breast cancer development, but also breast cancer prevention and treatment. As mentioned, my name is Gentry Dodd. I'm a physician here in Indianapolis. I practice occupational medicine, lifestyle medicine, and physical medicine and rehabilitation here in downtown. Quick outline, just going to do a quick brief epidemiology discussion, very high level on that. And then we'll move into some nutrition related risk for breast cancer. And then kind of the bulk of it is preventing and treating breast cancer through dietary intervention, which may surprise some folks, may not, but I think there's some good science behind it. So we'll start off with a story. This is my mother, the one in the back. Those are my two kids. That was a few years ago, so they've gotten bigger and taller and ornerier. But my mom, it was 6 years ago. No, excuse me, 8 years ago, was diagnosed with breast cancer, invasive lobular breast cancer. She underwent surgical resection and met with many surgeons, met with multiple different oncologists, had radiation oncologists give her radiation therapy, all for this breast cancer that lots of times can be related to lifestyle factors. Not every time, of course, but she was, as you can see, my kids adored her. They still do. But there was, being her son as a physician, there wasn't much that I could do at that time. I'm not an oncologist, not a surgeon, not a cancer specialist. So I tried to do what I could with what I knew, and so I dove into the research and tried to come up with some solutions for her that could really help. And so this research is really the culmination of that effort. So some quick epidemiologic stats. It's the most common female cancer in American women. It affects almost 250,000 new cases every year. There are about 270,000 cases of invasive breast cancer and about 62,000 of non-invasive breast cancer in 2019. These are a little bit old stats, but still similar numbers that we see now. And it's the leading cause of cancer death in women worldwide. Interestingly, it also affects men. About 2,600 cases of invasive breast cancer in men were predicted at the time that this research was being looked at in 2019. Most of them present with abnormal mammographic findings, but up to 15% of breast cancers present with a mass that is not picked up by mammography. And another 30% or about a third of cases present with a mass in between the mammograms. So the point is mammograms are important, absolutely important screening tool, but we have to be diligent in between those. One thing to note is that breast cancer does not occur overnight. It takes multiple doublings of the cancer cells to eventually develop enough to be detectable, either by palpation or by mammography. And so, in fact, what we call early detection may in fact be too late. Meaning that if somebody's considered healthy until they show signs or symptoms of the disease. So, in a young mortality population, about a fifth of them had who died from unrelated causes had an occult breast cancer found on autopsy, meaning that they had breast cancer in their body, but didn't know it. And so, if we can prevent it from getting to that, even or slowing down that doubling rate, then we're in better shape. So we may not be able to stop the initiation of cancer, the beginning of cancer cell formation, but through appropriate nutritional intervention, it's been shown that we can slow down its growth. So cancer prevention and treatment can become one and the same thing through nutrition. Some risk factors for breast cancer. Many of us know this already. There are 10 recommendations from the American Institute for Cancer Research as far as lifestyle intervention, achieving 3 of those. So diet centered around plant-based foods, limiting their alcohol consumption, and maintaining a normal body weight, demonstrated in those individuals a 62% lower risk for developing breast cancer, which is significant. In addition, women who walked every day and ate a plant-based diet for 2 weeks had better cancer-fighting blood. So I look at food as kind of a package, right? So you can't go to McDonald's and say, I want a cheeseburger, hold the cholesterol, hold the saturated fat, hold the sodium. All of those are disease promoting, but we can't separate it out. We got to choose the food package that is most effective and gives us the most bang for our health, and the most bang for our buck. And so by choosing those foods, which is largely a plant-based diet, these women had cancer-fighting blood instead of cancer-promoting blood. Alcohol is another risk factor. The World Health Organization declared it as a definitive human breast carcinogen, essentially clarifying that statement a few years later to say no amount of alcohol is safe. So even light drinking, just 1 drink a day, demonstrated a small but statistically significant increase in breast cancer risk. The problem is not the alcohol itself, but what it breaks down into in the body. The acetaldehyde is carcinogenic, and that digestion process that begins in the mouth begins the conversion alcohol into acetaldehyde. So it starts as soon as we consume it. Light consumption of only red wine. They didn't say what specific type of red wine, but it may not be associated with an increase in breast cancer risk. That's the only alcohol. And that's due to a compound that blocks the estrogen synthase, which makes the estrogen. And that's found in the dark skin of the purple grapes. Interestingly, we don't see that same protective effect in green grapes. So white wines don't have the same effect, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. Melatonin suppression. So melatonin, as you guys know, is a sleep-inducing hormone. It's normally released when the lights go out and it's time for bed by this organ called the pineal gland that regulates the sleep-wake cycle. It's also thought that melatonin can suppress cancer cell growth. Blind women who are constantly in the dark and thought to constantly release melatonin have half the odds of breast cancer. And converse, those who have increased nighttime light exposure have increased risks of breast cancer. So people who live in extremely well-lit neighborhoods, night shift workers, in these population cohort-based studies. That's one thing I should mention is a lot of this data comes from cohort studies or population studies. It's hard to do a nutritional intervention that's scientifically rigorous, meaning double-blind, placebo-controlled. I mean, people know what they're putting in their mouth. But with that being said, there's a huge body of evidence that shows all points to the same thing. So at some point, when there's smoke, you got to say there's fire, and I think we have fire here. Heterocyclic amines are a type of molecule that's produced when this certain way that we cook meat-based foods. So through roasting, frying, grilling, baking, the longer the meat's cooked, the higher the concentration of heterocyclic amines, which are related, that consumption of that is related to increased odds of breast cancer. And this last bullet point is interesting. So the levels of heterocyclic amines in smoking vegetarians are about the same as non-smoking meat eaters. So the cancer risk there is elevated with consuming charred meats, essentially. We'll just a little bit more about this. We'll skip over that in the interest of time. Cholesterol is found in proliferating areas of cancers. So the accumulation of cholesterol is generally a feature of cancer prevalent tissues. And the more cholesterol we eat, the higher the risk of breast cancer becomes. Prolonged cholesterol ingestion, which generally comes with animal-based foods. Plants don't make cholesterol, so there's no cholesterol in plant-based foods. Even if we just sprinkle a little bit of cholesterol in white blood cells, there's an immediate inflammatory compound release, which inflammation leads to initiation and promotion of tumor cells. LDL, which is the bad type of cholesterol, results in breast cancer cell proliferation and invasion of surrounding tissues. And those breast cancer cells can travel even further when LDL is present. There's actually been pharmaceutical companies, not the one that I work for, have looked at using LDL cholesterol as a Trojan horse to deliver anti-tumor drugs because they can travel into those tumor-rich tissues. But unfortunately, that didn't have success. Cholesterol, a little bit more on that. When women who are on a statin with breast cancer have been shown to live about 40% longer before the cancer returns. So they have a longer cancer-free period if they're on a statin, a cholesterol-lowering medication. But some studies show that the use of statins the risk outweighs the benefit in some of those studies. So it's not definitive on that one. 27 hydroxycholesterol, which is a you know, byproduct of the metabolism of cholesterol, can function as an estrogen and actually increase the production of breast cancer cells. It's pro-estrogenic, which explains the finding that women with heart disease risk factors, so um, heavy, don't exercise, eat cholesterol-rich foods, they're more likely to develop breast cancer. Oxycholesterols, which this 27-hydroxycholesterol is an oxycholesterol, those are related to the development of Alzheimer's as well. And it can be involved in all the stages of cancer development, initiation, promotion, and progression. A little bit more on cholesterol. Some estrogen-driven breast cancers. Again, that last slide showing that 27-hydroxycholesterol can act as an estrogen. Some tumors may rely on it to grow when estrogen isn't available. So the lower our cholesterol, the lower our risk for breast cancer, but also cardiovascular disease. Let's skip through this. Soy. So this is a controversial topic, which is promulgated by a lot of misinformation on the internet, which essentially say soy foods promote breast cancer, which is thought to be secondary to phytoestrogen compounds called isoflavones. Estrogens in the lab have shown to stimulate breast cancer cell growth. So that links it. That's what the naysayers hang their hat on. But there are two types of estrogen receptors: the alpha receptors and the beta receptors, which have different tissue distributions and often have different opposite effects. So the alpha receptors are located in the breast; they're pro-estrogenic. The beta receptors in the breast are anti-estrogenic. Soy phytoestrogens, which is kind of the culprit that we saw in the last slide, or the presumed culprit, preferentially bind to and activate the beta receptors, the anti-estrogenic receptors in the breast, which have anti-proliferative effects on the cancer cells. And we can see this effect even if you just have a couple 2 to 3 servings of soy-based foods in a week. Misconception stems from my studies. When the mouse consumes like 10 to 12 times its body weight in soybeans. Well, if that was the case, if we did that with ourselves, we would have some alpha receptor activation, but normal dietary patterns don't allow for that. As I mentioned, just a few servings a day can result in excess activation of the beta receptors, which is preventative for breast cancer. Those who consume soy-based foods beginning in childhood have decreased risk. And women who ate the most soy in their use have been, in some studies, been shown to have less than half the risk when they're in Asia. Then when they come to the US and adopt a Western lifestyle, which includes the Western diet, then the rates go back up. For those that already have the disease, adding soy to the diet reduces mortality, reduces recurrence of breast cancer for both estrogen receptor positive and negative tumors in the young and the old population as well. I'll try to speed it up. I know we're close to time here. Fiber, also a very important food component. Just across the board, lower breast cancer risk. One thing to note is there on the right side, the risk doesn't really fall until we get about 25 grams per day. The average American diet consumes about 15 or less grams of fiber per day. So the more fiber we can eat, the better. But I don't mean Metamucil or over-the-counter products. I mean from food. So beans, legumes, split peas, chickpeas, lentils, unrefined grains. That's where we want to get our fiber. That's how our body can use it the best, is if it comes from natural sources. Greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, are detoxifying agents. this one study looked at non-smokers who were fed pan-fried meat with broccoli and then without broccoli, and those who had consumed the broccoli with the pan-fried meat that had the heterocyclic amines that we talked about uh, urinate significantly less carcinogens. Flaxseed is one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. It has 100 times more lignans than other foods. Lignans are these phytoestrogens, similar to what we talked about with soy, that can dampen the effect of estrogen within the body. And they are activated by, when we consume them, they have to be activated by the gut. So a healthy gut, which has good bacteria, consume the lignin precursors, and then that becomes activated. Let's see. Yeah, this study was interesting. So the double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized intervention, which is one of the only nutritional studies that has this approach, were flax muffins. So the breast cancer patient who regularly consumed flax seeds decreased risk of dying from breast cancer. It's inexpensive, readily available, and a potentially dietary alternative to breast cancer drugs. Now, this is a good point to put the caveat. This is by no means a replacement for breast cancer treatment that is the current adopted standard. This is in addition to what people may be doing. So take-home points that I would like to emphasize, and I call this my this is meant to be a joke. Dr. Dodd's breast cancer obviating and operational banishment system. You can see the acronym there on the left. So one, increase soy-based food consumption. It doesn't have to be every day, but we want to get a few servings in over the course of the week. Flaxseed every day, maybe a tablespoon of flaxseed, but it's got to be ground for our body. Our body can't chew through the whole of it. It has to be ground so we can get to the good stuff. Eat a diet low in cholesterol with minimal to no animal-based foods. And the same diet that we use to prevent and treat breast cancer also is good for the rest of our body. We have decreased rates of colon cancer, gastric cancer, prostate cancer, decreased rates of heart disease. We can reverse heart disease. It's the only treatment that we have that reverses heart disease. We can treat the symptoms of it, but we can't reverse it unless we adhere to a whole food plant-based diet. Decreases the rates of flares of autoimmune disease like multiple sclerosis, kidney disease, liver disease, etc. So with that, I'll leave you with a picture of my son who, this was him playing with a leaf blower. He liked to use that finger as his pointer. But that's what we said to breast cancer with my mom, and she's been 8 years cancer-free. So I can't say it's totally because of the diet, but I'm sure it helped. And that's
Thank
all.
you. Thank you so much. That was very interesting, very informative. I know that nutrition has a lot to do with the way that our body fights different diseases. So it's very interesting to hear about. I'll ask our other two presenters to come back on video just so that we can field a couple of questions here. I know we're over on time, but I wanted to give each of you just at least one question to answer. I'm going to start with Sally, and you're talking about teen vaping. If we have parents who are watching this and they have discovered that their teen is vaping or they're very suspicious that their teen is vaping, what's the first step to take there?
Yeah, I would suggest going to the Live Vape Free Adult program, getting the adult conversation guide, getting the information, and preparing to have that conversation. And just, open, don't be, accusatory, have an open conversation, and offer resources. We've got some great free resources. This is addiction, it's hard to quit, but we do provide resources to help you come alongside that youth and help them get through it.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Waterman, I wanted to ask you about people who have darker skin. We hear that the risk factors around, burning easily or having light hair or light eye color, but can't everybody develop skin cancer?
Absolutely. So we know that having darker skin does give us some protective measures, but you can certainly still develop skin cancer. Sometimes it happens in unique areas. So we know that if you have more melanin in your skin or darker pigmented skin, you are at lower risk overall for melanoma, but it can happen on perhaps the palms or the soles of your feet or even underneath your fingernail beds. Unfortunately, oftentimes those are more aggressive types of melanoma, and there can be a delay to diagnosis, especially if you're not checking the bottom of your feet. Those can be tricky areas to catch. So sometimes it's a more advanced stage when we find those skin cancers. So while yes, anyone can have skin cancer, even if you have darker pigmented skin, you can still get sunburnt as well. So protection is important for everyone.
And just to tag on to that, an additional question, for people of moderate skin tone, Latino, Asian, and they have a lot of moles, how does
Mhm.
that play into it?
Right. So we know that if you have, of any skin type, if you have 50 or more moles, you do have a slight increased risk for melanoma. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to get melanoma. Just because you have more moles doesn't mean you're destined to get a melanoma. It's actually more common to develop melanoma out of normal appearing skin than it is for a mole to go bad. So, but we just know that if you have more moles, then you've got more active melanin in your skin. So that can lead to some problems down the line. So good question, though.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and the last question for Dr. Dodd. We had some interest in your nutrition plan. If someone is interested in getting started on some of the many things that you mentioned, I was over here scribbling down notes about cholesterol and grilled meat and alcohol. And so if you have any resources to share, I think we have some people who would be interested in
Right.
that.
Yeah. So probably what I would recommend, there's a gentleman named Michael Greger. He's a physician. I think he's based out of Cornell. But his grandmother died of heart disease. And so the same dietary approach that we talk about for breast cancer also has beneficial effects for heart disease. And so he started this foundation called nutritionfacts.org, which is a nonprofit and he's got a bunch of books out. I don't get a kickback from it, unfortunately, but um, he's got everything that puts out is research based and has work cited along with it. And so he's got this website, nutritionfacts.org, that has these 4 or 5 minute videos, so they're easy to digest. Um, I would that's one resource that I use pretty frequently myself. Um, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine also is an organization that I'm part of that for on a professional level puts out a lot of resources for physicians and healthcare professionals, but then also for the general public. So there's lots of information on there for the public to access. Um, those would probably be my recommendations to start with.
All right, wonderful. All right, well, thank you so much to our three presenters. This has been a wonderful webinar to get some education around things that we can do in our everyday lives to prevent cancer. We appreciate all of you. And for our attendees, we will be back here tomorrow at the same time. And we'll have some additional presenters talking about cancer screening. So I hope that you'll join us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.